How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Diamond Mounted channel. Today it's an intermediate to advanced level thing we're making. We're doing a 4-claw gate collet. It's an intermediate level skill thing to make, so you need good abilities in cutting, filing and soldering, and just general control to make something neatly. But the video will take you from start to finish, and I will explain everything as I'm doing it so you can see what's happening, and also I'm explaining what's going on in my mind, what I'm looking at, things to look out for, just problems that may come from doing things certain ways and how to avoid them, and just generally giving you my experience as a professional jeweler. So this is a close-up of the 4-claw collet we're going to be making. Yes, this has 8 claws, but they're split claws because the corners of my stone are quite flat. I didn't fancy the idea of putting a round claw there or a square one and not covering that entire side. So I decided to, as I was going along, I decided to have a split claw on there. It's not something you have to do. I'm making another video as we speak showing a single claw, just a flat claw, and it's very simple compared to this one. But this is just the style and design I decided to do. But the techniques I show in the video are the same for one claw. I highly recommend you have a stone, maybe a big stone, to make it slightly easier to make, something slightly larger, just so you can see what's going on more clearly. This was a cheap amethyst, which I actually really like it. It's quite a deep purple on there, almost looks like an expensive tanzanite. It's actually just a £15 amethyst. So I recommend, if you can find some big stones that are cut quite neatly, that will help you as well. And then you can practice mounting on, or even just make a piece of jewellery out of them. Okay, let's get into this. I'm having to do a voiceover this whole video because when I was filming, I had a lot of people coming and going out of the room, phones ringing, people were talking right next to me. It was impossible to video and speak alongside what I was doing. So I decided just to stay quiet and I'll just do the voiceover when the video is all edited and complete. So here we are. Right, I've got a flat piece of metal there. I think it was, the measurements were about 8mm deep, about 1.1 thick, which is way more than I needed, but I kind of left it like that because it shows what you can do in this technique, so you don't have any excuses saying your bit of metal is bigger than mine. Right, those pliers were actually just a cheap pair of pliers I bought from Brick Lane Market in East London, and I used a grinder to grind down one side, so it's like a round, half-round pair of pliers. You can see I've got parallel pliers there. I'm levering on the hinge part of those pliers. They're pushing the metal across. Notice how I'm annealing that. Flame is going along the metal, so I'm not wasting any heat, I'm not wasting any gas. You're going to anneal quicker that way. That's the most effective way to anneal a big piece of metal. And yes, that was a cheap plumber's blowtorch. So I just tweak it and move along it. Before you get to anywhere near the other end, I suggest starting curling it back from the other end, because if you go from one side to the other, it gets very difficult to curve the other one. So yeah, start bending that back before you get there. You can see how I'm doing it. Just tweak it a little bit and then move along. Tweak it a little bit, move along. You'll find it will kink like that. Doesn't have to, but it's just, you're not a robot, so your hands will twist slightly as you're putting it across. Try not to, but it does happen. Tap it flat before it gets too bad, anneal it again. Just keep annealing it, just keep the metal soft. So you can see I've gone all the way around. What I'm doing, I want a nice even curve all the way around. So I take it, take a step back, look at it, you can see the curve is quite nice, but where I'm pointing at now, there's a flat spot. There to there. It's very straight compared to the sides, either side of it. So that's where I'm going to bend it from and try and get that curve all the way around. This is way too much metal for that collet I'm making for my stone. If you're doing it in gold or platinum, don't mill out that much metal, it's a waste. This is silver, I'm making a master in silver, so I've got the freedom to do it. So a good guide for your circular inner edge is the handle of your ring stick, especially if it's slightly smaller than your bit of metal, because you can really see the gap. It's like I can straighten out that curve a little bit now, so it's sitting on there a little bit tighter. Just need to pull that one side in, so it's nearly there. It doesn't have to be that curvature of your handle of the ring stick. The tighter you go, the more steep of an angle your collet will be. So that's good enough now. You can see the ends are a little bit straight. They're impossible to get around. Have another look. Choose one side or the other, because about half of that's going to be your collet. It always seems to be one side slightly nicer than the other. So that was my favourite bit, so that's going to be my collet. Yeah, cut off. Don't use the bit near the end, that's always straight. So I'm going to start mine there. This is stone I'm using. It's about 10 carat amethyst. Right, you might be tempted to line it up like that, but don't have the end as your corner, because you want all your corners to be the same. If you turn up 3 corners and the last one is where they join up, you'll have like a very straight corner. When you file them up, it'll be different to the other 3. So yeah, start with it about halfway down the stone. So what I do, I mark the top. I was about to cut it, but I thought I'd explain this. You go in straight from the outer edge, straight down. So imagine that line goes down through the centre of the circle. That's the system for getting all the claws, all the corners of the collet the same. So you can put your saw frame on top to draw a nice T, so you've got perfect right angles off the top. You can bend it slightly so it doesn't hit the blade, sorry. So I just nick it, saw it right down, use my tri-square needle file, score that line all the time. Just keep checking your angle, making sure you're staying above the centre of the circle. Alright, get that quarter of the way down, I guess, and then I take it with the square file, because you want that to be a 90-degree V in there, so it's going to fold up 90 degrees. So there you go down 2/3, 3/4. You want a little bit of thickness, because you've got to bend it without it cracking, snapping off. So what I do is, you don't have to. Oh yeah, first of all, you don't have to use parallels, but any pair of pliers, just hold it nice and close to the edge, straight. I bend it about that much, because you don't want that metal cracking. It could be quite hard still. I flux it, then I anneal it. When I've bent it up 90 degrees, I solder it. Get that angle, check it's okay. If you didn't file it out enough, you could always put a saw blade through it, so you've got a bit of space to close it up a bit more. So yeah, check it with your set square thingy. You don't have to do this, but I solder it up as I go along. I just like the idea of it being strong. Sweep out your skin or your bench tray, whatever you got, because you're picking up the stone. You don't want to risk dropping it and breaking it on a tool or getting it scratched. So where you're going to position your stone. Looking down on the stone, you can't have any metal showing around the outside. So hold it straight above. You get a guide where you want to go. Always have a fine marker pen. I really recommend that. One of the most important tools on your bench. When you're diamond mounting, you need to mark things all the time. Right, God, I made this like almost a month ago now. I need to remember what's going through my mind. Yeah, basically the stone sits on there. That's going to be flattened, so lining the stone up, it's going to drop down lower than where it will sit now with that raised edge, that curved top edge on it. The higher the stone sits, the smaller the collet needs to be. You want it just inside that edge. There's an element of you have to make decisions yourself, not just follow what I say, because the belly of your stone will have different angles on compared to mine. But yeah, once a stone sits in there, that top edge means it's going to sit lower, and then also I'm going to cut out that inner edge at an angle so the stone sits more comfortably. So again, it goes down a little bit lower again. So basically, hold it and measure it where you want your corner to be, higher than where it's going to sit at the end. So I think I would say just have the stone, so you can turn it upside down, it helps you out. Have it just so the edge is just disappeared under the girdle when you look down on it. And then that allows you a lot of space to drop down. So I mark it with a pen, it gives me a guide, and I sort of check it again, and I'll move my line across. But yeah, remember you're going to be cutting it and filing that V out. So basically the outside of it is where your corner is going to be. You want to do this as accurately as possible, but there is an element of being able to adjust it after, because you can file the walls in, but you don't want to be making things thinking like that. You just want it to be perfect straight off your first attempt. You might have to adjust one side but not the other, and then you end up with one thin wall and one thick wall. It all gets a bit of a mess. So yeah, looking at it, looking down on it, I'm looking across at it, imagining where the stone's going to sit, sort of going through it, going through the stages of making it. You want to be thinking like 3-4 steps ahead, so you don't make any mistakes. You want to know what happens after you make an adjustment. It's like cut-off wheel. They're very delicate, but I do recommend using them. You can start off lines like that with it. So yeah, you can see I've cut that, filed it down 2/3 to 3/4, little half bend. Keeping it, I know I'm not using pliers on the other end, but I'm being careful not to bend it, trying to keep it straight and flat. I fluxed it, I annealed it. Let's see what we've done here. Yeah, bent it up. So the first corner doesn't really matter where it is. The second one's important. Again, like sweep out your skin, get your tools and lemel out of the way. Make sure there's no lemel on your fingers when you're handling stones. Put it on there, check it. That edge should not be visible around the stone. And you have to consider the stone's going to drop down lower. You've still got the length to adjust, so you can play with how much of the corners you're going to take off. Skipped a bit there. So yeah, I've done the third one. The third one's the most important, I think. It's all got to line up. Checking that top edge is parallel with the one behind it. The whole thing is just generally squared off nicely. It's nice to have a bit of thickness in the metal you're using, because it gives you a bit of adjustability. You can file it up and get things perfectly flat. Right, this is a technique I highly, highly recommend. Having that little split, little cut in your bench peg, you can hold things in large pairs of tweezers. You can squeeze things closed while you're soldering them. There's very little pressure in silver because it gets so soft when you're soldering it. But it's important to hold things closed because when you heat metal up, it expands, which means your solder joints open up if you've just got them sat on a charcoal block. So that's all soldered up now. Again, checking over it. Be brutally critical about your work. Be your worst critic, your own worst critic about your stuff. Check it. These calipers are great because they measure to hundredths of a millimeter. So check your... Don't worry about the outside because you can file that, but that inner hole should be quite accurate. Like, if you get into like 2/10 difference, it's going to be really noticeable what you can see. So try and get it to 1/10 at the most, I would. So look at the numbers. So 5.991. Other end. 5.91. 5.88. See, that's pretty accurate. Now remember, I didn't measure that. I just gauged it by eye. I just worked to the stone. Obviously, the stone was cut quite well. I just worked to the stone, marked it with a pen, took my time, checked it, double-checked it, triple-checked it. Now check this out. The back, 3.75. Put that one in the corner, right on the edge. Put that one in, straighten it up and slide it up to the same other one. 3.75, 100% accurate. It's possible. Double check it because I didn't quite believe that was true. Yeah, it's slightly different. That's okay. Doesn't matter too much anyway because I filed up the back quite a lot because that's really deep, that bit of metal I'm using. So flatten the top, next stage. It's coarse file, do it quickly. Checking the stone, brush out your skin. Make sure you're flat, not tilting down one side or the other. Both angles are the same, from that top being perfectly horizontal. Right, the stone's going to sit that way on the finger. So another thing to consider, you've got that kind of curve on the bottom where it sits on the finger. Yeah, that's going to be cut out. So thinking ahead, you're going to be putting a daylight hole around the outside, and you can't go too low with it because when you file up that finger shape, you can't go anywhere near the hole really because you've taken strength out of the collet. So that's all filed up straight-ish. Not too much. Notice how I haven't bothered going right up to the corners. The corners are still rounded. That's where the claws go in, so don't worry about it. Castings tend to shrink between 3, stone is nice, between 3 and 5%. So I made this, just checking a stone there, the corners sticking out from the stones are the same on all 4 corners. So yeah, I made this just slightly too big. If I was making it in gold, and it was going to be set directly from what I made, I would have made it a touch smaller. So everything seems lined up quite well. And the stone will drop down more than that because I can take out from the inside. Yeah, I made it so the stones just touch the claws. See, just the dividers, the calipers are a nice gauge for parallel lines. Better than parallel pliers. So that needed a bit more adjusting. Right. Next stage, we're going to use dividers to score lines down the outside where we're going to cut the daylight hole. So I recommend you don't have to use a paper disc, use a buff stick or anything, but just get the buff line not going horizontally across it long ways. When you've got buff lines going the opposite way, you can score very lightly and see the line. And there you go, use the buff stick as well. So yeah, buff it that way, and then when you score a line the opposite way, you hardly have to touch it. You can see the line very clearly. I think I just scratched it with a knife when I did this. Maybe I just touched it, and you can see that line there. Alright, so I've taken the bottom of the collet up. I'm looking at how much the stone is sticking out. The stone's going to sink down lower, so I'm taking that in mind. Someone speaking Japanese on the phone. Yeah, again, be brutally critical. Have a look at the gaps around the stone. There's no way you're going to make it and it's all touching perfectly. So you can see where the stone is touching. You can take metal away and it can drop down a little bit, just not sit flat. That metal looks really thick, but it's because I've got burrs all around it and filed it with such a coarse file. this is much harder work making this video, having to narrate my actions like way after I made it. So I was going through things in my mind while I was doing it. I'm not exactly sure what I said. Okay, so looks like school day today. Right. Here's your chance to put your little bit of design in it. Thin daylight holes are difficult to do them neat, but I do prefer the look of them. They just look more kind of modern and fresh. Remember, you've got that finger shape coming out the bottom, so don't go too low. Basically, you see what I drew with the arrow on it? That's ugly. I think you're better off having a slightly deeper top half and a slightly shallower bottom half, but be very wary of going too close to that finger shape that's going to be filed out. Especially when you've got something with a bit of distance to it, you have to file up into it more to get the curve for a finger size. Yeah, I think I was just pointing out, don't go thin there. About halfway, slightly lower is usually my my general go-to design. You can literally just score it in the middle and then cut below it. It depends what stone you've got and what shape you've got. It's what looks right. It's kind of up to you just to sort of have a think. You can even use your marker pen to just draw it on and see what you like the look of. And I use, I haven't got acetone, I've got nail varnish remover. You can just give it a wipe. You can buff it off if you want, but once you've chosen where your line's going to go, use your dividers. Right, start on the corner. Use like a cut 3/0, 4/0 saw blade, quite a thin one. The thinner you go, the more likely they are to kind of wander offline. Like 4s are the thinnest I go really when I'm diamond mounting. I use a 6 if I've got to cut a really fine link or something. So yeah, basically I start with the corner. Just keep your saw blade straight at all times. You don't tilt it and don't turn it to the left and then tilt it to go back to the right. Just keep it straight. Starting that. Just really take your time. What I do is I creep along. I don't just go straight down. I kind of see what I'm doing. I've got it just off the surface. So I'm kind of drawing a line with the saw frame. And then I just make that line, creep it along, make it deeper and deeper. Cutting just inside one of my lines I've scored on there. My daylight hole, the measurements were just not quite enough to cut twice, so I just had to cut once and open it up. If you've got a wider gap, you can put 2 lines in it. Japanese in the background. Japanese people being very polite to each other on the phone. Thank you for calling. No, thank you for calling. It was an honor to speak to you. Thank you. It was an honor to speak to you too. Goodbye. Goodbye to you. That's Japanese phone call, business phone call translated for you. So I'm going around it. Once you start to break through, you can feel it. Be careful, you don't want to just sort of suddenly jump through and ruin it. When you start doing these and you feel like you're doing a good job, better than you've done before, it gets quite nerve-wracking because a mistake will just ruin all the work you've done in the past hour or 2 hours. So I think I did a close-up so you can see the line drawing. There you go. This is a 2x watchmaker's eyeglass over the phone. So yeah, look, I've just stuck inside one line and then done that all the way around. my advice is keep going down and cutting it to at least halfway, like preferably even more than halfway. It helps you out later on, and I'll explain why. There you can see I've gone right now. Be careful. You're looking and cutting that top half, but keep in mind the bottom half of the saw blade is also going up and down in that gap. You don't want it to catch. If you're tilting it from left to right, you could be sawing the edge away underneath and not know about it. Yes, I put a thicker saw blade in the gap. That was, I never understand the codes they use for their measurements, but I think I had a 3-0, and then it was just a 3. Right, paper discs. Definitely get some of these if you haven't got these already. They help you out so much. They really help you do a neat job on stuff. So, trick we do in these professional jeweller workshops. Get a paper disc, some rough sandpaper. It doesn't have to be a buff stick. Preferably just some really coarse sandpaper. You've got the gritty side underneath. And then skim off that top edge. Skim it off, look. You can see that corner, sort of chamfered it. And what you've got now is like a blade. You've got like a blade edge. Now you can just see it. That blade edge, bit of a sandpaper disc. That's really useful at getting in this gap. Touch it really lightly. If it catches and you ruin the edge of that disc, you've got to change it. You've got to keep it really, really fresh. So yeah, just scoot out. It won't go straight through straight away. But you can open it up and to the point where you can excuse me, to the point where you can get the disc in, and then it's really, really quick to open it up and straighten it out. But yeah, definitely learn to use these paper discs. That was my box of those little cut-off discs. That's so brutal. I wouldn't put that in there unless I was making something with a really big gap. But it is another tool you could use. That disc, that paper disc, that was one of the coarsest you can buy. I think you can get finer ones. But I like coarse files, coarse sandpaper, and coarse buff sticks. You saw that buff stick, that yellow one. That's like the coarsest stuff that like builders use. It just work faster. This is a small needle file. You can see I've ground the safety back, and I ground the back down so I can get it in smaller gaps. This helps get the edge really perfect. Okay, so this disc goes in now. Keep it spinning. When you don't push unless it's spinning. Whip in a little bit, but it goes in there. And then with that you can get it really even all the way around. So now, you could file the corners back before you start doing that, but it helps you get the lines perfectly straight when you've got a corner there. So I score the lines, cut it first, and then I file the corner back. But you've taken strength out of that collet, so you have to be careful when you're working on it now. It's only silver, you can literally just squeeze it closed with your fingers. Work into the stone all the time. Make sure that corner's just right. I just wanted to point out my angles. If that claw goes on there, it's going to look really straight from the ends, which I don't want. So I need that to look tapered outwards to match that side. See, that side's parallel, nice angle. Again, we're thinking ahead. If we put a claw on that, what's it going to look like? That angle's going to be alright, but the other side is not. Stone up again, filed it back, that claw's disappeared now, that corner's disappeared behind the stone. if I was making this in gold and round claws, I'd use a cylinder phrase and just cut a groove in it, and then that's where the claw goes. Unfortunately, I made it difficult for myself, so I made these V claws out of round wire. Because I wanted to cover the corners of each flat. So I'm going to put that on. If you're doing this the first time, I don't recommend using a claw, which is made of 2 claws soldered together. It's just making life difficult for yourself. But yeah, this casting, I want that angle. Mine's going to be, I've got 2 flat surfaces, the flat claw against the flat collet. I want it to sit there at the right angle and the right distance from the stone. So I made up 4 claws, made sure they're all exactly the same. This is like crunch time. It's really important you get this stage right, putting the claws on at the right angles. Don't use binding wire. Tweezers with a little toggle thing on it. Hold them in position, ready for soldering. Oh, it's not good on that angle, by the way, but I'm just explaining how to use tweezers. I swear I edited this wrong. I skipped loads of things. So yeah, as you can see, I soldered on. I had a solder coming out of my join and my collet, so I flooded loads on there. I've only got 1 grade of solder, I've just got medium solder. Just having a look around. Right. I've got to point out something. See that top edge nearest us where I'm pointing, and the edge behind it, parallel. You tilt it away from you so they line up. And at the point they line up, that's flat to your eye. Then keep it there at that angle, and then we're doing the same but with the claws. So everything should be straight. When they're at that point where they disappear, and then rotate it, you see the edge of the claws, they should be absolutely parallel and then disappear perfectly parallel as the collet, top of the collet is flat. And if you can do that at all 4 corners, they all match, the outer ones and the inner ones. So I've got to kind of look at the inner ones I didn't really pay too much attention to, so I felt like I made them quite samey. So I just worried about the outer ones. Also, these claws are too long, which don't do it if you're working in gold or platinum. It's wasteful, but in silver, it helps you out because it exaggerates any kind of angles that are going wrong. Also, when you put it down on a flat block, it should sit nicely and not rock about. Be really, really confident that your solder joins are very good on those 2 claws, because once you cut out this daylight, this side of it, basically the top and bottom half are being held together by the soldering in your claws, so make sure they're done properly. At the same time, don't flood it, don't put too much on. I don't mind working in silver. I don't think many people would make this kind of jewellery in silver, but it's a quite clean metal. Better than 9 carat. Right, remember I said about going halfway or even more than halfway? The reason is, when you get to this stage, you don't want to be cutting through that last bit really close to your claw you put on, because it can, when it goes through that last second, it can jump down and then you can nick your claw, which balls it up a little bit. Using this, surprisingly tricky to get it flat, go right across. Look for any lumps or bumps and even it out. third claw. So checking my angles. I'm looking. Does it match the other side? Does it line up? The nearest edge and the one furthest away, get them flat, and then rotate it. That looks slightly off. Be really critical. Don't ever say, oh, that's good enough. If you can adjust it, have the patience to do it. Take your time and get it right. That looks slightly wrong to me now. You'll have good days and bad days. Some days you line it up and you swear it's perfect, and you solder it and it's completely wrong, and you think, what the hell was that about? So, got that resting on my charcoal block, a little bit solder, just a bit. You're better off doing a few solders with tiny bits rather than one big chunk. And you see that bit of solder fell off my paintbrush there? The rule of the universe is, once that's dropped down, it disappears. It's vanished, it's gone. So I'll just get another bit. Blowtorch. I don't mind using a blowtorch, to be honest. There you go, solder's done. Okay, so 3 claws on now. I was checking it. For some reason I couldn't see it when I lined it up when it was still in tweezers. Got a bit of a rattle there. That's what you don't want. It means that one on the right is lifting up. Have a look at it. Now I've got a clue that it's wrong. Use your saw blade. It's a nice straight line. Get it in the middle. Get it up vertical. Yeah, no, you can see it's tilting out. It's going out. So I had to pull that claw off, unfortunately. I thought I may as well show you me pulling the claw off. Hold it somewhere secure where it's not going to bend when you're pulling on it. Nice and secure. Flux it again. Be very gentle with silver, because when it gets hot, it turns to butter. However, be careful, it's not possible. I'm destroying my Collet brushes. Flux it, they're hot. Got a pair of tweezers. A little bit of weight on it, like very little, just the weight of my hand. Lift it up slowly. You don't have to pull hard. Once the solder's hot, you let go. Let's go. There you go. That pinged off. Didn't even bend. So here we are again. That's on there now. No, what? That looks like it roused. That looks better now. See that one on the right it's not sticking out anymore. But be honest with yourself, be critical. Don't lie to yourself just because you don't want to do the work. Because if that one's wrong, and then when you're lining it up, doing the horizontals and verticals, when you're lining it up on the next one, that's going to be wrong because you're working to a wrong claw. Right, fourth one's on. The fourth one's actually the hardest, I think, because you're lining it up. You've got 2 to line it up against, and you can find out that you've done one wrong. You thought it was right, but the measurements are so minimal. Right, I'm snipping these off. There's one nice thing about working in silver as well. Don't worry too much about wastage. It's such a cheap metal. Right, paper disc as well. Good for that, because a file can be a bit brutal on something quite delicate. That was a bit faster. Very slow going down, but you can literally just cut through it. I would recommend not going right down to the collet if you're having it cast, because when castings come back, if there's any kind of rounded edge, you can file it back up nice and sharp. Get a flat needle file, go over it, because the sides of your collet are your hammered bit of metal from the start, remember? So there are sort of lumps and hammer marks and stuff on there. Nothing major, but certainly not perfect. So just go over it, flat files. Be careful of your corners, of your claws. I ground off the teeth on one side. I still felt like the daylight gap wasn't completely flat. So this is another technique you can use a lot, especially when you're cleaning up castings. You're basically skimming the saw frame, saw blade through. You're just sawing, but you're kind of skimming the edge. Do this all the time when you're cleaning up castings. It is a skill you get used to. Rubber wheels, definitely get some of those. Not the soft ones, these are quite hard. It's like a sort of hard, it's almost a bit plasticky, the rubber's so hard. And they stay sharp. They're really good for cleaning up solder joints. Even if you've got a perfect solder line, if you magnify it with your 10 times loop, you can see the solder line is rough. So you zing it up with one of those, and then it polishes up perfect. These are Bond Street jewellers techniques, people. I know because I made some of that stuff. Also, the jewellers I used to work for, some of it used to come in for repairs and rings or sizing, so it's always interesting to look at the really expensive stuff, how it was made. It's quite a pleasure when you think, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. I know a better way. Little ego boost. Yeah, so wrap paper around your files, go over it again. I don't know if you can buy these, but I've always made them anyway. This was just one of those, off one of those paper whizzers. It's quite a soft metal. Cut down the end, about 6, 7 mil, 8 mil. Open it up with a knife blade, fold over a bit of paper at the end, and that's a little mini paper whizzer. These are really useful for cleaning up round claws, because you're zinging round it, look, from left to right, and then later on when you're polishing up and down the claw, so you're going the opposite direction to your buff lines, which aids you at polishing them up neatly. So there's my stone in the collet. Remember I said I made it just slightly too small. I want it, considering the shrinkage in casting, I just want it to just touch the claws as it sat in there. And it should shrink and be good for setting. And then it'll be set with the claws still looking straight, not bent right over or bent out. Just take a nick out of the claws and then it can be set like that. So I was looping it, seeing where the stone's touching, taking out metal, so the stone. Just imagine you are the stone. Like, feel how the stone would feel sat in there. You don't want it, all the weight of it and all the pressure being set squashed down on a sharp edge. So get rid of any little edges where it's sticking out. Makes all the stone sits comfortably and flat. And there it is. Stone is out. Again, go over it with the loop. Like, be really critical. Double check your solder joins or your angles. Look at it closely, look at it sort of far away, go out the room, come back, look at it again. You can see it's not perfectly flat on the block, so I've left a little bit of metal on the end of the claws underneath. That's just for cleaning up casting to get it nice and sharp afterwards. So you should have something like that. Nice flat walls, everything parallel, claws at the same angle, all matching. This is through the watchmaker's loop again. This is the level I take it to for casting. When you get your casting back, you clean it up, you really clean it up, get it really perfect. It's better to buff it with very fine grades of sandpaper as much as possible, and then give it a light polish. Because polishing rounds off all your edges and can make it look less sharp. So keep it very sharp using your emery paper on your needle files.
If you like the content and it was useful, please hit like and subscribe, and you can be notified of future uploads coming soon, where I'll be doing lots more of this kind of thing and other things in the near future. Thanks, bye.